Greetings, fellow traditionalist Catholics. This is Sergio Baldassarre II, and welcome back to my channel. So, for these next two videos, I'm going to be doing a two-part mini-series on two anti-popes that both took the name and same number, John the 23rd. So, for part one, I'm going to be focusing on the first anti-pope, John the 23rd, Baldassarre Cossa, whose false reign started in 1410 to 1415 after quote-unquote succeeding Antipope Alexander V and then officially being deposed by the Council of Constance in 1415. So, Baldassarre Cossa, who was born in the late 14th century, in the late 14th century, born to a noble family, in Italy, in the Kingdom of Naples. Way before becoming quote-unquote Pope, he and his two brothers did serve in the military under the King of Naples. And the thing is, with Baldassarre Cossa and his brothers, their family's noble lineage was starting to dwindle. So while in military campaigns, the only effort for the Cossa family to survive completely was to engage in piracy in order to help their family reclaim their fortunes and everything else. Later on in life, Baldassarre Cossa studied civil and canon law at the University of Bologna. Then later on, during the time of the Great Western Schism, where the church had been split into two claimants. The first claimant, that would be the true Supreme Roman Pontiff, Pope Gregory XII, and the false claimant in Avignon, France, that would be Antipope Benedict XIII. So Baldassarre Cossa was made archdeacon and at a time served under Gregory XII. Now, way before, as I have said, way before his ascension as quote-unquote Pope, there was an agreement between the two claimants that both Gregory XII and Benedict XIII would not, by oath, not create new cardinals. Well, apparently Gregory XII broke that promise, created new cardinals. This now created another problem, which forced Baldassarre Cossa and all cardinals within Gregory's court to leave him. That would include the cardinals under Benedict XIII, and convene a council in Pisa in order to resolve the schism, which they thought they succeeded by electing Antipope Alexander V. And apparently, Baldassarre Cossa and decided to swear his allegiance directly to Alexander. Well, apparently both Gregory XII and Benedict XIII did not recognize the council nor Alexander, so now there was now a total of 3 popes. Within a year, Antipope Alexander V died. Before his death, Baldassarre Cossa was made a bishop under Alexander the day before. And so a conclave was held, and Baldassarre Cossa was elected and took the name John the 23rd. So now you have Gregory XII, Benedict XIII, and now John the 23rd. Now, I know that if you're familiar with the YouTube channel Vatican Catholic, that brother Peter Diamond did talk about the Great Western Schism in a 4-part series. There were some other things that Peter Diamond did not mention, which was later on when the Council of Constance had started and was still proceeding at the time, that numerous charges were held against Antipope John XXIII, which I will get to shortly. So I'm going to be covering those charges later against him. So the Holy Roman Emperor at the time, Sigismund, King of Hungary and Holy Roman Emperor, told John to convene a council in Constance. Now, here's the thing. Before Alexander V and then later with John the 23rd, Europe had been split. Which kingdoms swore their allegiance to? Well, the Holy Roman Empire, England, and most of Italy did swear allegiance directly to Rome. Therefore, their allegiance went directly to Gregory XII and his other predecessors. That would be Innocent VII, Boniface IX, and Urban VI. Urban VI was the first Italian pope since the last French pope. That would be Gregory XI. And then, of course, France and Spain swore the allegiance directly to Benedict in Avignon. But things later shifted by the time Alexander V and John the 23rd were both quote unquote elected. So a council was summoned in Constance, which is in Germany in the Holy Roman Empire, in order for the council to be resolved. So apparently, Baldassarre Cossa, who is Antipope John the 23rd, apparently believed that he was not going to survive and will not keep his rule. So apparently he ran away from the council. He disguised himself as a post carrier, mail carrier. I forgot what I had read within some of the texts that I read, and then fled. So this forced the Holy Roman Emperor Sigismund to go and pursue him. Well, he sent a number of his men to go pursue him throughout some parts in Germany, in places within the Rhine River. Cossa was later apprehended and arrested and brought back to Constance. Was later put on trial for numerous charges. That would be, I have my phone right here. Let me read it. Okay. 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 So he was later deposed by the council. He was charged with heresy, simony, schism, and immorality. But according to the 18th century historian Edward Gibbon, who is famous for his 6-volume set, The Declining History of the Roman Empire, wrote about this. The more scandalous charges were suppressed, which were the ones I just mentioned. The Vicar of Christ, well, not actually, was accused only of piracy, rape, sodomy, murder, and incest. So those were the charges that John the 23rd had, which of course Peter Diamond did not mention in his 4-part series about the schism. He was in prison for several months and then was later released under a heavy ransom by Cosimo de' Medici of the Republic of Florence. Cosimo de' Medici is actually the grandfather to Lorenzo de' Medici, aka Lorenzo the Magnificent, or as it said in Italian, Il Magnifico. So, John the 23rd ended up getting deposed, was tried, and imprisoned. Now, as for the true Pope, Gregory XII, he simply resigned. He would actually be the last true Pope to resign from the papacy, and did it in a peaceful manner. he would actually be the last pope until the resignation of Antipope Benedict XVI in 2013. That would be 6 centuries later. But as for Antipope Benedict XIII, the council had asked him if he would resign. Benedict refused, so he was deposed and excommunicated. Well, even though the council deposed him, but he still didn't give up his claim. He later went back to Avignon, but moved his court directly to Pensacola in Spain, where he would spend the remaining years of his life as being quote unquote Pope. But you know what? Benedict XIII to this day still has support in Spain, where he later spent the rest of his days ruling his quote unquote pontificate, and still claim that he is the true Pope, even though that a true Benedict XIII later in the 18th century was elected. That would be Pietro Orsini. So after that, a conclave was held 2 years later in 1417, where Cardinal Otto Colonna was elected and became Pope Martin V. After Baldassarre Cossa's release from prison, Martin V made him Cardinal Bishop of, let me see, I forget the name of the Italian city. He became Cardinal Bishop of Frascati, but then he died 2 years later in November of 1419. So there was no Pope for 2 years after all three claimants were gone. Gregory XII resigning, John XXIII deposed into prison, and Benedict XIII still kept going on, even though the council excommunicated him and declared him deposed, even though he still didn't step down. So there was no Pope for 2 years until the council had finally ended in 1417 with Cardinal Colonna being elected Pope, taking the name Martin V. Now, Baldassarre Cossa, as I said, died in November of 1419, was buried in Florence, had a special statue, not a statue, I'm sorry, had a special tomb that was erected by Cosmo himself. Let me see. Medici oversaw the construction of his magnificent tomb by Donatello, that would be an artist, and someone else, and was buried in the Battistero di San Giovanni in Florence, which is in front of that big cathedral. There's a building in front of that famous cathedral in Florence. I forget the name of it, but he is buried in there. And as on the sarcophagus, it reads, John the former Pope. Now, it is also stated that Pope Martin V protested in vain against the inscription on the sarcophagus, which I just quoted, John the former Pope. So Cosmo de' Medici took the liberty in having his tomb erected and buried in Florence. Now, Antipope Alexander V is also buried in Florence, but I think he's buried in there too. So that covers the first anti-pope, John XXIII, in which I will later, in part 2, talk about the second anti-pope, John XXIII, Angelo Roncalli, who took that name in 1958. The man who started a false council, that would be Vatican II. So I will be covering the second part, covering the second anti-pope, John XXIII, and his dark history, which I will explain. So you tell me what you think in the comments below. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell for future updates. So this is part 1 of the two anti-popes, John XXIII. So stay tuned for part 2 covering the second anti-pope, John the 23rd, Angelo Colley, who also took the name John the 23rd, and covering his dark history and the start of Vatican II. Because both anti-popes who took the name John the 23rd both had called a false council. Even though the Council of Constance, in fact, did succeed in resolving the schism, but Vatican II is a different one. All right, stay tuned for part 2, and I will see you soon. Have a blessed day. Take care now. Bye.